Welcome to another edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Sean Garrison, your host and editor of DadsDivorce.com. Today we're joined by Dr. Amy Baker. Amy is one of the leading experts in the field of parental alienation syndrome. How are you doing today, Amy?
I'm good, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Now, you've written several books on the topic of parental alienation syndrome, and you recently completed a novel titled The Misery Checklist. Can you explain the plot of that novel and specifically how it relates to PAS?
Sure. So the novel is called Misery Checklist, and it's written from 2 points of view. So it's alternating points of view. One chapter is written from the mom's point of view, one from the dad's, and it goes back and forth. And the summary of the plot is that it begins when they meet, the two people, Hannah and Rick, and it tells the story through the first 20 years, I'm approximating here, of the child's life. And over the course of those 20 years, the father engages in significant parental alienation strategies and ultimately is able to turn the child, Mandy, against her mom. And the book really is designed to give the reader an inside perspective both into the trauma of the parent who loses a child and the diabolical sociopathy of the parent who will stop at nothing to hurt their former spouse, even if that means doing tremendous psychic damage to the child.
Sure, and you've been doing research on parental alienation syndrome for years. Can you explain how awareness for this issue has grown and sort of what we currently know and what are the latest developments regarding PAS?
Well, when I started doing research back around 2005, I think, I didn't even have a website. There were very few professionals who did have websites. There wasn't nearly the internet presence as there is now. If you go on the internet now and just type in parental alienation or parental alienation awareness or parental alienation expert, you're going to find pages and pages and pages. Whereas back when I was starting, people would call me and say, I didn't realize there was a name for this. I don't see that often anymore. People really are much more savvy, and that's a good thing because this is really a problem that is so much easier to prevent than to fix after the fact. And so prevention really can only be achieved with awareness. So when two people are getting divorced, and parental alienation isn't just something that happens in divorce, but that's a scenario that I'm picking right now. When two people are getting divorced, both parties should really be very, very well educated about what is alienation and what are the 17 primary parental alienation strategies so they know what not to do themselves. And if the other parent is beginning to engage in those behaviors, the parent, the targeted parent, has an opportunity to know about it before it becomes of tragic proportions and their kid says, you know what, Mom or Dad, I never want to see you again. And the mom in the story, Hannah, really didn't know what hit her. And even though she knew her ex was sort of a malicious, sadistic parent, it didn't really occur to her that he would go to such lengths to turn her child against her. And Hannah, like many, many, many targeted parents, back then, especially before there was as much awareness as there is now, was told by her friends and family, oh, don't worry, your kid will know who's the good parent, and your kid, you're a good mom, you're not going to lose your kid. And she was discouraged from taking it seriously. And that is definitely something that needs to stop, and I think that's where awareness can be so helpful, because you really can't rest on your laurels and say, well, I was a great mom or dad, and I know my kid loves me, therefore I don't have anything to worry about. The main message of the book is, guess what? Even good and loving parents lose their kids.
Absolutely. And is there any other advice you might give to a parent who feels like they're starting to be alienated by either a spouse or an ex-spouse?
Oh, absolutely. I've written several books filled with advice, and I also offer individualized telephone coaching for targeted parents because obviously knowing what you're dealing with is an excellent beginning, but then you need to know how to avoid the landmines because unfortunately, targeted parents contribute to their own alienation after the fact. That means they've been a good and loving parent, they're a normative parent, they haven't done anything wrong or terrible, there's no reason for their kid to reject them. But when the alienation starts to kick in and their kid starts to withdraw from them or be rude and arrogant and hostile and rejecting and humiliating and demeaning and degrading and denigrating the way alienated kids behave, the targeted parent makes one, if not both, sort of catastrophic errors. One is becoming angry and defensive. I did not do this. I did not do that. How dare you accuse me of? Who's lying to you? All of that. Or becoming demoralized and apathetic and passive. Either way, the kid then says, that's right. Mom really is a nagging witch, and she's mean and angry all the time. Or, gee, Mom's right. Dad really is a monster. Or, gee, Dad's right. Mom really is depressed and useless. Because the parent becomes so overwhelmed with feelings of helplessness and hopelessness and despair and anger. So basically, I spend an enormous amount of time thinking about how to help targeted parents interact with their kids who are becoming alienated in such a way that they don't contribute to the alienation. And there's really an art to it. You cannot rest on your laurels, and you cannot be a traditional wipe that smirk off your face young lady kind of parent. That does not work with alienated kids.
Sure. And is there anything else you'd like to add, Amy?
Well, the Misery Checklist is a novel. It was submitted to a writing competition sponsored by Amazon. And if people want to, they can go to the website. It's called Kindle Scout. And you can read, I think, the first 2.5 chapters of the book. It's called The Misery Checklist. And between now and May 22nd, I believe that's the last day of the competition, people can nominate the book, and if it gets enough nominated votes, then the editors at Amazon will read it. I take it they don't read all the books that are nominated. It has something to do with the more votes, the more likely it is that the editors will read it, and then hopefully it'll get picked up for publication. And everybody who nominates the book will get it for free. So it's sort of a win-win. And if you want to find out what happens, the only way to do that is to help the book get published. If you get to read the first 2.5 chapters, hopefully you'll be hooked and you'll really want to see what happens to Hannah and Rick and their daughter Mandy as Mandy becomes alienated. And so I hope that people go to the Kindle Scout website and read the first 2.5 chapters of the Misery Checklist and nominate it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Amy. We really enjoyed having you here on Dad's Divorce Live.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
That was Dr. Amy Baker, who is a researcher, author, expert, and coach in the field of parental alienation syndrome. To read an excerpt from Dr. Baker's new book about parental alienation syndrome, The Misery Checklist, make sure to visit her website, amyjlbaker.com. You can also read a number of articles regarding parental alienation syndrome on DadsDivorce.com. This has been Sean Garrison, and that'll do it for another edition of Dad's Divorce Live.